going to be a casual time together, everybody. So like I said, the chat is open. The Q&A is open. We'd love to get your questions as we go along. And Professor Nelson and I are just going to talk about this destination. I have a lot of information to share with you, and so does he. I'm delighted, actually, that Professor Nelson will be our faculty leader October 6th through 18th on the Albania and Northern Greece travel program. If you haven't made travel plans for October and you're thinking about this trip, I encourage you to use this as an opportunity to learn and decide if it's something that you want to enjoy with us. If you aren't able to travel with us, you're still very welcome to be a part of the presentation and hopefully learn something about Albania and Northern Greece for your own travels later or for a future program with Alumni Academy. I'm really thrilled that we get to welcome Professor Robert Nelson, who is Robert Lehman Professor in the History of Art, Emeritus, and he was educated at Rice University and the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU, where he received his PhD. He taught at the University of Chicago from 1977 until he moved to Yale in 2005. At Yale, he was the chair of medieval and Renaissance studies. He's been the recipient of many fellowships for his research on the art of Byzantium and medieval Italy, and we'll learn a bit about what those two things have to do with Albania as we go through the presentation today. His latest books are Hagia Sophia, 1850 to 1950, Holy Wisdom, Modern Monument, and later Byzantine Painting, Art, Agency, and Appreciation, published in 2007. His exhibition of icons from the Monastery of St. Catherine in the Sinai at the J. Paul Getty Museum in LA was well received in 2006 to 2007. He co-edited volumes devoted to the Church of San Marco in Venice and the Old Testament in Byzantium. And for some years, he has been interested in the relationship between art and the audiences that view, study, contemplate, and appreciate it. This has led him to study medieval and modern collections of art, the devotional and political uses of images in Byzantium, and medieval understanding of vision. And lastly, that concern has extended to modern audiences and how they view and appreciate medieval and especially Byzantine art. How is that for an introduction, Professor Nelson? Would you like to add anything on your recent interests?
Oh, well, that's fantastic. And you make me sound like I'm very learned, etc. I'll confess right away to this group that I've never been to Albania. This is why I'm intensely interested in going on this trip. Those of you that are a bit older, perhaps, and maybe that includes all of us, know that for many years Americans were not allowed to go to Albania. And it's always been a mysterious place to me. Although I studied it and I've taught about it, this will be a great opportunity to think about the country, but also to think about northern Greece, which is a special area of Greece that may not be as familiar to some people who know Athens and, of course, the Parthenon and the great museums and the islands, etc. The trip ends in Thessaloniki, and it begins in Tirana and then shortly goes to Durres. In my mind, this trip is working around the principal east-west road in the Roman Empire. You might call it Interstate 80 of the Roman Empire, something like that, or Interstate 20 if you live in the southern part of the United States. In other words, a highway went from, Lauren, can you show the next slide? Can you advance one? Yeah. Oh, well, I wanted to get to my map.
Yeah, hang on a second. I'm going to stop sharing. You keep talking because
okay.
I think I need to pull up a different version.
Okay. Anyway, if you draw a line between Durres, which was at the left of the itinerary that you saw, and over to Thessaloniki, which is at the right, you have there the two termini of the trip, but also the two of the most important sites on this great road that ran from Durres all the way across the Balkans to Thessaloniki, and then it went on to Constantinople. In Durres, Roman ships would be there in the harbor, and they would take travelers across to what in Italy now is Brindisi or Brindisium in the Roman Empire. And there was a prominent Roman road that went directly to Rome. So this was a basic connecting, a basic means of connecting the Roman Empire. And we're going to see two termini. Here's the road. So Durres here in Albania, I don't know if my cursor is working for you, but it's over at the left. And then you follow the red road and it comes down to what in this map is called Saloniki, which is an alternative name of Thessaloniki. And then the Via Egnatia went on to Constantinople. The spellings here are very strange. It's a map in some Balkan language that I'm not sure of at the moment, but it doesn't really matter. The territory is the same no matter what the language is. And so we're going to start here in central Albania, and then we're going to pick up some sites to the south, and we're going to go inland, and then we're going to go across the border into northern Greece. As you can see, the big city of Ioannina here, on to Meteora, which is a great monastic site, and up to Vergina, and then over to Thessaloniki. In Albania, we will go through, I'm not quite sure how to say names in Albanian, I hope to learn there, but I'll call it Gjirokaster, which sounds to me like—
That's right, it's Gjirokaster.
Okay, sounds to me like it means a circular castle, but we'll find out. That's a rather interesting city in Albania because two important people were born there.
Oh, don't give it away yet. Wait till I get to that slide.
Okay, so I'll pause and let you continue.
That's all right, yeah. We want to make sure we don't give away all the secrets before before we go. But yeah, we will talk a bit about that because it's a fascinating place, and I'm glad that you brought that point up of who was born there, because I think it's an interesting one. And I think you also make the point that there's so little known about Albania. I was fascinated to learn that it's been inhabited for 10 millennia, and yet it's still this undiscovered country. It's just across from the boot in Italy, across the Adriatic Sea, and it has this history that you pointed out on the map that you shared with us. Let's see if we can get, it has this history, and when you look at the strategic positioning of it, then you understand that all of these cities that we're visiting have ancient Greek connections, have Italian connections, Roman connections, Byzantine, Ottoman. Albania was once part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was under the domination of Italy, Mussolini's Italy following World War II. So it has all of these different influences, and that's really what makes it a very, for us as Americans, the kind of place that we would think of as very exotic. A lot of people didn't visit Albania, both Professor Nelson, for the reason that you say, because you weren't allowed to for a long time. And then following the fall of the Soviet Union, it just didn't have tourism infrastructure. So, you know, it wasn't like there were hotels and places to stay and visitors attractions were set up. So we've now sort of reached that point where you can both go and the tourism infrastructure is in place. And yet you get to see these places that have largely remained unchanged throughout the centuries, as well as you get to see some of the really fascinating history that is foreign to us, the communist history of Albania. And as you pointed out, our start is in the capital city of Tirana. It's been the capital since 1920. It was founded in the 17th century when Albania was part of the Ottoman Empire. And then in 1992, Albania became the last European country outside of the Soviet Union to become democratic. That, of course, ended its long period of relative isolation from the West, as we talked about. And now it has this colorful architecture that encompasses its early period and evolves through its era of fascist and Soviet domination to create a really eclectic patchwork of architecture and culture, a diverse visual history, and a fascinating past and present in Tirana. It's known for its street art. It's known for cafe culture. Cafe culture is something really unique in Europe, the way that people enjoy sitting in a cafe, but that apparently is a big pastime in Tirana. There is one highlight, which of course you will visit on this tour and you would visit on any tour, which is Skanderberg Square. And that history of the design of this square really tells the story of Albania's rulers and its relationship to its rulers. The square was built by the Austrians in 1917, but at that time it was not a square, it was a circle. It was a tribute to its monarchy in the 1930s. It was redesigned by the architects of Mussolini's Italy, dominated by a statue of Stalin until 1991, which was taken down and replaced with what's there now, which is the statue of Skanderberg, kind of a nationalist Albanian figure from the 15th century. He was an Albanian national history. You see the statue there on the left. And he led the rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. And so that is why he becomes this iconic figure who is now a testament to Albania's history. And the square, Skanderberg's, I'm sorry, I'm saying it. We both, Professor Nilsson and I both said we've got to really make sure that we do our Albanian pronunciations well today. Skanderberg Square now stands as a testament to Tirana's entry into a new era of its history. And I just want to point out this mural, which you see on the National Museum of History, which is located there on the square, because there are a number of different monuments that you find when you go to visit the square here in Tirana. You find the 19th century landmark Venetian clock tower. You find the Ethem Bey Mosque, which was built in the 18th and 19th century. You find the Palace of Culture, and then the National Museum of History, which you see pictured here. And it has this treasured mosaic mural that depicts the evolution of the Albanian people throughout the centuries. The square was actually renovated in 2017. And that makes it this new monument at the heart of the city that still contains, as I described when we were looking at the last slide, all of this history of the different rulers who have dominated Albania throughout its past. In 2022, so just this year, Tirana was named European Youth Capital by the EU. And that's a designation that really just sort of illustrates what's happening here, this transition into a fresh and renewed energetic global city that is starting to attract the attention of many travelers who are just curious and wondering, how come I've never been to Albania? And I want to highlight something that really expresses the energy of Tirana, its evolution from under the leadership of its Prime Minister, Edi Rama, who was a former art professor turned activist and politician. He became mayor during the early 2000s, and he transformed the city by painting its, at that time, very dilapidated cement block communist era concrete buildings into these bright facades with brilliant different colors and quirky patterns. And this is a sort of an innovative way to try to revive the city and change its architecture and its image. There was an interview that he did with The Guardian, and I want to quote it for you because I really think it captures the spirit of what you see when you see these brightly colored buildings. He says the colors of the buildings were not art for me. It was a political action with color because we did not have money to make construction projects. People needed everything. They needed water, supply, roads, lighting, and painting these buildings had a chain reaction that I could not have ever imagined. Once they were colored, people started to get rid of the heavy fences on their shops. Once we had painted roads, we had 100% tax collection from the people, whereas tax collection was normally 4% before that. People expected and wanted to contribute to the city because they realized that the colors gave new life and existence to the city. So I think that's just very interesting to capture when you go to Tirana, you see these brightly colored buildings, a reimagining of a life after its communist era and its movement into a democratic time. Also famous in Tirana, kind of famous and infamous, is the pyramid building. It was designed by the daughter of Enver Hoxha, who was the country's communist leader from the end of World War II until his death in 1985. The pyramid was completed in 1988, and it became a museum dedicated to Hoxha and later became the NATO base during the Kosovo War in the 1990s. You can see on the picture, you can see graffiti and things that were written on it. It became quite a dilapidated building, kind of an eyesore in some people's minds, had many different lives over its time since 1988. And just last year, a Dutch firm has begun to transform the pyramid. It will become a youth-focused people's monument and a cultural hub of the city. So again, sort of testament to Tirana's taking on a new era in its life and being really excited to embrace the youth and the vibrancy of the city. So we move outside of Tirana to Durres and Apollonia. And I want to just sort of jump back to Professor Nelson. I know these were two places that you were really interested in, and just wanted to see if you had any comments that you wanted to make about them.
Well, both Durres and Apollonia are major classical sites. Both were terminuses of the Via Egnatia, which branched and went to Durres and went to Apollonia. Apollonia falls out of the picture because in antiquity it was on a prominent river. The river changed its course, as happens, and that doomed the town. That circumstance is absolutely ideal for archaeology because that means you don't have a modern city built above all of the ancient ruins. So it's relatively easy to reveal the ancient city of Apollonia there. And we'll see the archaeological park, which you see a view of in the upper left corner of the image. And Durres, the ancient Dyrrachium, also has a major excavation. This whole area, as I said, was important for the Roman Empire. In the Middle Ages, Byzantium controls part of it, much of it, for some of the time. And then in the later Middle Ages, the principal power involved here is Venice. Venice, as you know, is at the top of the Adriatic Sea. And as its ships sail down to the Mediterranean and over to the east to connect with the Silk Road, it needs what in the 19th century were called coaling stations. It needs places to stop along the Adriatic coast to refuel their ships, not with coal in the late Middle Ages. And so Venice maintains an active political interest in this area. The Ottomans come and change the religious composition of the region to substantially Muslim. And that meant that Albania had a a certain role to play during the Balkan Wars in the 1990s and the disputes over Kosovo, which I'm not going to go into at this moment. But Durres and Apollonia are our major ancient sites here on the Adriatic in Albania, and I'm very eager to see them.
And really, still, Durres becomes one of the second most populated city in Albania. So even though its history goes back 3,000 years, it still is an important, active center of life in the country. And so it's, you get this theme as you go across Albania of the old and the new sort of coexisting. But it's fascinating just to think about how much ancient history and how many different civilizations are here, especially when you think about, as you pointed out, Professor Nelson, in Italy, you have this connection, but you also have this Greek connection where Durres was settled by Corinthians and settlers from Greece who arrived from that region in 627 and set up the city. It's got these archaeological sites, which we're going to see, and you've mentioned a couple of them. One of the notable ones to focus on in this area is Hadrian's Amphitheater. That's the second largest in the Balkans. And as you pointed out, during the Roman era, Durres flourished because it was in this strategic location, linking the Adriatic Sea with Byzantium. We get to also visit the Archaeological Museum while we're in Durres on this trip, before we move on to Apollonia. And in Apollonia, noted as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, that's another one of the themes on this trip. Among our Alumni Academy travel programs, this one to Albania and Northern Greece has probably the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites in one itinerary. And that being the case in Apollonia, because of just how well preserved, just in terms of the city, pretty much the entire city is a UNESCO site. It was one of the most important cities of the Mediterranean world at the time. And as you kind of wander around, you get a sense that the culture there was very unique because it had this Greco-Roman fusion that happened and made it into a key economic, political, and cultural center in the 4th century. So one of the highlights that we're seeing when we're in Apollonia among the ruins is the beautiful Byzantine frescoes and Roman mosaics. And very fortunate to have you, Professor Nelson, to help us make sense of what we're looking at when we see these things, with your background. So delighted that you're able to lead this trip, because that's one of the wonderful features that we have, is just the interpretation of all the things that we're seeing. Now we move from Durres and Apollonia into central Albania, and we reach a city on the Asam River called Berat, also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I think I saw one or two of you mention that you had traveled to Berat in your travels in Albania. It's known as the City of 1,000 Windows and has more than 2,400 years of history of traditional Byzantine architecture, and a collection of white Ottoman houses that rise up the hillside to the castle. The castle sits at the very top of the hill, and that's how it got that designation, all the houses rising up the hillside, making it the City of 1,000 Windows. The castle now belongs to the residents of Berat, and they reside there amidst an ensemble of Byzantine churches and a museum that includes works by some of the most famous iconographers of the 16th century. It has over 100 icons on display. And fascinatingly, the museum is located in a 13th century cathedral of the Domination of St. Mary. It's a testament to Albania's history as a crossroads of culture, that the Muslim Quarter is also another must-see here, because it boasts 3 grand mosques: the Lead Mosque, the Bachelor's Mosque, and the Sultan Mosque, which is one of the oldest in Albania. So quite a bit to see in Berat. I'm going to just advance to the next slide, but just wanted to check Professor, if you wanted to chime in on any of the things that interest you in this central Albania region.
Well, just to say a few words about the 2 lectures that I'll give on the trip. Laura and I have discussed how to fit these into the trip. And basically what I want to do is talk about the ancient cities on the Adriatic, Durres and Apollonia, at the beginning of the trip, and to anchor the trip in this notion of the Via Egnatia, this great Roman road that went across the Balkans. The trip will end in Thessaloniki, which is the 2nd largest city in Greece. And it's in northern Greece. And there I'll talk about what the Via Egnatia is like in Thessaloniki and tell you something about that city, which for me, for my taste, is far and away the most important city in all of Greece. I know classicists would think that's scandalous, but I don't value Athens as the center of the world. But Thessaloniki is a much nicer city to visit, in my humble opinion.
Well, certainly the residents of Thessaloniki would agree with you.
Right. No, it's very, very pleasant place to be. Whereas Athens is hot and polluted. But anyway, I suppose I shouldn't have said that. But,
I like Athens very much.
Okay.
So wonderful. You get that lecture early in Apollonia, on Apollonia and Durres, and then we travel through the center of Albania as we make our way toward northern Greece. Moving on to the southwest of Berat, we arrive at Byzantine, which was founded in the 4th century BCE, and it's now another important archaeological site in Albania. I think another one of the big themes of this trip is just how significant the archaeology in Albania is, and yet so undiscovered and underexplored by everyday travelers like us. This area is part of an ancient fortified mountain complex. So we're moving into a mountainous and hilly region. In Byzantine, it has a Hellenic street plan and buildings that are considered just to be an extraordinary representation of late antiquity. The Emperor Julius Caesar named Byzantine a colony during the Roman era, and bronze coins dating back to the 3rd century prove that it was quite prosperous of a colony during that era. It's known for its impressive ruins, the ancient agora, or the main square that's located there, its stadium and amphitheater, and its 5th century basilica, which features numerous mosaics, and there are a number of artifacts that are still well intact in the area. But it's also just a stunning natural site. It's on the Vjosa River, and the views that you get from Byzantine down to the Adriatic shores really just make it a beautiful and scenic stop along our tour. And from there, we move on further down the road to Tepelena, which is a town that's sited in the Vjosa River Valley. It's one of the most lush locations in the country. And now you're traveling along the winding mountain roads. Someone talked about a bus trip that they took from northern Greece into Albania in the chat and said it was one of the most harrowing that they remember. The good news on our trip is that you're with a professional coach driver, so it won't be harrowing. But I do always take my motion sickness medication on any trips that go through hilly regions so I don't get caught off guard. And I would definitely say that would be something to think about on this area. This is home of, or it was home of, Ali Pasha, who was an Ottoman Albanian who served as ruler of the European territories in the early 19th century. A fascinating story of Pasha's life is that he was so infamous for his tactics. He was known as the Balkan Napoleon. He created his own state in Albania and Western Greece, and his lavish court attracted many Western travelers during his era, including Lord Byron, who was quite inspired to write about the region. which of course became a preview of the inspiration that Ali Pasha would become for writers and artists throughout the Romantic period. You can visit his castle here in Tepelena, and that was his second residence until 1820. It sits atop a hill, and it is now home to residents of regular citizens of the town, and it's open to the public for visit. So quite an interesting visit here in Tepelena, an interesting history. I just want to stop, Professor Nelson, in case you wanted to chime in on any of that.
No, I'll let you continue and say something else in a few minutes.
Okay. So here we get to what we were teasing a little earlier, Gjirokaster. It's known as the City of Stone or City of 1,000 Steps, whichever you like. It is another UNESCO World Heritage destination known for its well-preserved Ottoman buildings and its old town, which is amongst the most beautiful in the country. It's got winding limestone streets and a shopping bazaar, which is one of the main attractions there, and a historic mosque. And it's the birthplace of one of the country's most well-known writers, Ismail Kadare, and it's a partner to Berat. So we spoke about Berat just a few minutes ago. Both of these are considered museum towns by UNESCO, preserved because if you think about back to the architecture that we looked at when we saw the capital of Tirana, we saw that sort of stone, or not stone, concrete, Soviet era architecture. And yet when you visit these towns, you get the original Ottoman limestone architecture. They did not go through the modernizing building programs of the 1960s and 1970s that sort of changed their visual look, and that's why they're considered to be museum towns. And then from there we go to Butrint, which is across the narrow strait from Corfu. So there's this dynamic that goes on throughout the history of Albania between Italy and on the to the west and the eastern shores of Albania, and how that conversation unfolds. And likewise, that connection is also there with Greece. So Butrint was founded by Greek colonists 2,500 years ago. It showcases the Greek, the Roman, the Byzantine monuments, and that gives it its UNESCO World Heritage designation. There's a rich depth of archaeological ruins here, so we spend a whole day in Butrint and exploring this history that spans an ancient Greek acropolis, a Roman colony, Christian center. It was a Christian center of the Byzantine Empire, followed by Frankish, Venetian, and Ottoman rules. So it's one of the most archaeologically rich destinations, and yet you probably, unless you've been to Armenia, probably never, or Albania, you probably never heard of it. So I will stop there, Professor Nelson, and pass to you.
Thank you, Laura. Returning to Gjirokaster and to the author Ismail Kadare, I want to recommend several books that you might want to read before going. I've done a number of Yale alumni trips, and I always like to recommend a novel or two that gives you a sense of the place. And for Albania, Ismail Kadare is absolutely the person to read. He's quite prolific. He's written many novels. One entitled Chronicle in Stone is autobiographical and is based in Gjirokaster, which was Kadare's hometown. A more famous novel is let me get my notes here, General of the Dead Army. These are available in various forms. I got the Chronicle in Stone, I believe, in a Kindle version, and I bought the General of the Dead Army in a paperback from Amazon, but you can get them elsewhere, obviously. The other thing I like to recommend is you get some basic guide to the region. For Albania, the one that seems the best is by Brandt, B-R-A-D-T, which is available in the Kindle version. If, as far as possible, I like to buy books for trips I'm taking that are electronic versions because it doesn't add any weight to my luggage. And then there's another guide to Albania, which I've also bought. It's called Orientation Guide to Albania and Albanian Culture. It was published not too long ago by the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. You may know that as an institute. It's a major institute for teaching foreign languages. It belongs to the Defense Department, and their primary task is teaching languages to people in the armed forces that will then use them in the field, so to speak. But they also produce books about different regions of the world. And this is one that I picked up for, I think, all of $6 as a Kindle version. So Gjirokaster, I think it'd be interesting to read the Cadere book before to see how the world of that city in World War II compares with the city that we see now. So I look forward to running that experiment, as the scientists would say. And back to you, Lauren.
Thank you. So I've put all of those books in the chat, links to those books in the chat for those who are interested in picking them up. And Florette asked if there was recent architecture from the Ottoman era and famous mosques. So I will answer that in the chat as well, Florette, just to give you that. But I would say Gjirokaster is probably one of the top destinations that you want to visit if you want to see Ottoman architecture, for sure. And those wonderful
Lauren, I'll try to put together a bibliography for the trip and send it to people that are going, or send it to you so you can post it however.
We will have actually we have a virtual tour of Albania on our Alumni Academy website.
Okay.
And this webinar will be featured on that page. And so we will add the reading list to the virtual tour as well. And that will give you plenty to study if you want to learn about the destination. From the Gjirokaster region, we cross into Greece via the Vikos Gorge, which is a spectacular European canyon, sort of Grand Canyon of Europe. It's 3,300 feet deep, and it holds the Guinness World Record as the world's deepest gorge relative to its depth. And yet it's largely undiscovered by tourists. So not many people in this region, unless they're sort of looking for a way to cross the border. The region is filled with breathtaking landscapes, as you can imagine, and decidedly has an off the beaten path feeling to it. Along the route, we're visiting some of the centuries-old villages and fresco chapels that mark the road. And then we land in Ioannina, located on the north shore of Lake, I'm terrible with the Greek pronunciation, so this is where you're going to pick up for me, Professor Nelson. We're on the north shore of Lake Pambotis. I know I'm saying that wrong.
That's fine, yeah.
This is a university town, and it's the commercial and learning center in the area. Somehow I've been to Greece at least 6 times, and my Greek has not gotten any better, which means that I am not spending enough time in the university towns when I'm there. But I'm looking forward to being able to go back and pick up more Greek as I go along.
And on that note, you might find that those of you who are going on the trip, and I hope hundreds and thousands are going on the trip, I don't mean that literally, but you might find it useful to spend 15 minutes looking at the Greek alphabet online someplace. And so you can get an idea of the alphabet, and you'll be able to read signs, and you will be able to sound out Coca-Cola on a sign and other truly extraordinary experiences that will enrich your time in Greece. But anyway, it might be useful for you.
Well, and one of the things that you will learn if you try to read signs and find directions, which you do have some free time in these places to wander and explore on your own, is there are two key things about directions and finding your way in Greece. One is that every place has three names, and they might sound similar, they might not. Depending on who you stop and talk to, they'll tell you one of the three names. And even when you're in the place, you will see names of things of the town written differently and different names. The Greeks just sort of all understand and accept that that's the way it is. And the other thing is that everything is always just another block walk from the Greek perspective. So even if it's a 15-block walk, the person that you stop on the street and ask for directions will say, it's just one more block over there. And the next one will say, it's just one more block. So learning to read a little bit of Greek yourself can be helpful, but only if you understand that you need to learn all three names for whatever the place is that you're looking for.
One thing that, I don't know, perhaps this is a sexist comment, not of the sort you would normally think, but in the Balkans, males, if you ask them a question and they don't know the answer, they won't say that they don't know the answer because they lose face. Instead, they'll just say something. So you ask a male directions, and even if he doesn't know which way to go, he'll point in some direction. That's why I always confirm with a female because they're much more dependable and not so sensitive about losing face on foreigners. So females are more useful for getting directions. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
That it is interesting to note that the cultural differences when you're in these regions are unique and it's not the same kind of a culture in terms of gender dynamics as we have in the US or even in other parts of Western Europe. So these are things that you have to discover and sort of form your own opinions on as you're experiencing them. But anywhere you go, it's always interesting to learn about, what are the sort of cultural norms that are very different from what we do at home. And directions is one of them.
Well, it'd be interesting for me to compare the social world in Albania with Greece. Greece will be much more like our world. And it'll be interesting to see the degree to which Albania is a Muslim country with Muslim attitudes toward women, for example. If it is, and it probably is, a conservative Muslim society, males need to be careful about interacting with females. That's not a particular issue once you get to Greece.
Okay, well, let's keep moving along our tour. We stop at, have a day excursion to Durres, and we pay a visit to the ancient oracle there, along with the archaeological ruins and ancient theater that you see pictured. And then we move on to one of the highlights of our tour. One of the reasons that we are visiting the monasteries of Meteora. They were built some 600 years ago on massive rock formations in this region, and amidst, as you can see, just staggeringly beautiful landscapes. These monasteries are designated by UNESCO. So I did mention earlier, this tour probably has among the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites of one tour that we feature with Alumni Academy. This was once one of the most important monastic communities in Greece, and the Greek word Meteora means suspended in air, which really perfectly describes these Byzantine landmarks. Today, only 6 of them are active communities with a small number of monks and nuns residing there. And I'll stop because I know, Professor, you have some things to say about this region as well.
Well, I have been here. I've studied medieval manuscripts in the Meteora monasteries. Accent on Greek words is always awkward for English speakers. That is modern Greek accents. My general principle is, if you see a Greek word and you think you know how to say it, the accent is on a different syllable than you find comfortable. So this is pronounced Meteora, not Meteora, for example. Anyway, that's trivial. It's a very interesting place. We'll get a sense of a monastic life there. The richly decorated churches. I'm not sure if we'll encounter monks and nuns, but you'll get a sense of monastic life. There are very important monastic areas in Greece. The most famous one is Mount Athos, which is a peninsula about an hour's drive from Thessaloniki. Very difficult to go there as a tourist. There are no tours. Women are not allowed, and men that go have to pass through an extensive vetting process. But if you are male, it's quite an experience in one's life to go to these monasteries, which are active and very pious, and the liturgies are glorious. Back to you, Lauren.
Great. So someone just joined and asked what are the dates of the travel program, because they joined late. It's October 6th through 18th, 2022. And we'll put the link for how you can register in the chat. There's still space available on the trip. And there we go. The link has been posted in the chat. And let's see, there was just another question that I wanted to get to. I will answer any questions that have been posted in the chat, but I may answer your question at the end as opposed to now. But somebody wanted to know, what is the level of mobility required, hill climbing, et cetera, which I wanted to point out since we're looking at the monasteries, because obviously you can see in the picture there isn't an elevator or an escalator to get up. So if you're visiting the monasteries, there is some degree of walking. I have had the experience in Greece that the perception of climbing stairs there is very different. A lot of stairs to them and a lot of stairs to us are quite different. So while there isn't a strict mobility requirement for this tour, there may be some things that you would like to see on the tour that do require you to be able to climb flights of stairs at a normal pace, but just understanding that some of the places do have long flights of stairs. In terms of walking, we're always supported by coaches, so the walks that you have to go through with these tours are minimal. They're walking tours of the cities, etc. And if for some reason someone couldn't complete the walk, they're able to be supported by the coach that's there to take you on the tour. So I wouldn't let that inhibit you, but nor is it a good option for someone who really has very limited mobility.
Let me jump in. Obviously, we're not walking up to Meteora. We're going to drive up there in our coaches. That's not going to be a problem. Archaeological sites, when I take Yale students to this part of the world and we're visiting archaeological sites, I have a rule that they cannot go onto the site if they're wearing sandals, or much less flip-flops or something like that. Yale students love to wear that kind of footwear. You need good rubber-soled walking shoes to go around an archaeological site. So bring sandals. I'll bring my sandals along, but I won't be wearing them on the days that we're going to archaeological sites. You need good, sturdy shoes.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you for sharing that. And then we finished the tour in Thessaloniki, and I'm gonna just switch screens because I know Professor Nelson, you had shared a couple of slides to talk about Thessaloniki. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment so that I can pull up the slides that you
Okay.
provided me. But please feel free to keep talking if you want to just give that intro to Thessaloniki.
Sure, I'll say something. We were just looking at what's called the White Tower in Thessaloniki, which is part of a city wall fortification. That particular tower, I believe, was built by the Venetians. I'm not entirely sure on that. But there is an extensive city wall that goes all around the city that was from the late Roman period and reinforced throughout the Middle Ages. So Thessaloniki is the second largest city in Greece. It was also the second largest city in the Byzantine Empire, which at its great extent, or let's say its medieval extent, consisted of Anatolia or Turkey, parts of Syria, Palestine, the Crimea, a good deal, most of the Balkans, southern Italy and Sicily. Thessaloniki was the second largest city of the empire. So it was a major city in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, Athens was a small provincial village of little consequence, actually. In the early modern period, after the Byzantine Empire falls in 1453, Thessaloniki continues to be a major city of the empire, and by the 19th century, its inhabitants are about 1/3 Greek, that is Christian, 1/3 Jews, and 1/3 Muslims. Significant Jewish population in Thessaloniki, because the Ottoman Empire, you may know, welcomed Jews that were being expelled from Spain in 1492, and a large number settled here. And so this became, in the early modern period, Thessaloniki became a leading center of Sephardic Jews in the Mediterranean. I regret I have to tell you the subsequent history of that. The Nazis managed to conquer Greece, and they came down to northern Greece and shipped away almost all of the Jews in Thessaloniki to the concentration camps, and they were killed. On a little bit more positive note, we're looking here now at the agora, or the agora, the Greeks would say, meaning the marketplace in the town center, which has been excavated in the city because Thessaloniki had a devastating fire in 1917, and it burned a good deal of the center of the city. That's why you see these modern apartment buildings around the excavation site. I think it's safe to assume that the Apostle Paul, who wrote 2 letters to the people of Thessaloniki, walked in the same in the agora, because it was the center of the city. Thessaloniki is in the process of building a subway, and building a subway in an architecturally rich place involves all kinds of new archaeological discoveries. So it'll be interesting to see what we find, what we see of this new knowledge of Thessaloniki when we're there. Lauren, can you advance to the next image? Yeah. The Via Egnatia, which I've been emphasizing, that starts here in the Balkans at Durres, continues over to Thessaloniki, and there, oversailing the street itself, the late antique Roman Emperor Galerius built a triumphal arch, which has these Roman reliefs that you see here. This was part of an extensive redevelopment of the center of the city by Galerius. Look at the image in the top left, and there you will see in the center going across is now down a little bit. Take the cursor right here. That's it. That's the covered walkway of the Via Egnatia, and the center of that is the arch. And then immediately down from that is Galerius's massive mausoleum, which a couple of centuries later was turned into a Christian church, and it has some of the finest mosaics in the entire Mediterranean there. Beautiful, beautiful wall mosaics. On the other side of the Via Egnatia, down toward the sea, Galerius built a hippodrome, a racetrack. Imperial cities had to have a major racetrack, and that was his. And in the same area, he built his palace. Bits of that area we will encounter when we walk around the city because they have been excavated. But unlike Apollonia, Thessaloniki has been continuously inhabited from late antiquity to the present, so it's not very easy to excavate the city. There was a question about mosques. We will see some mosques in Thessaloniki that were for the Muslim population. And I understand that we will see some Ottoman mosques also in Albania. I'm very interested in Ottoman architecture, so I'll point out anything that seems of interest on the trip. Lauren?
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. And I think we got to most of the questions. I just want to re-highlight for everyone. We did put in the chat the link to register for the travel program, and the dates are here and the pricing as well as the link. So please feel free to email us or call us if you have any questions. Alumni Academy at yale.edu is our email address. And we have a couple of questions. Janet wants to know if there are any synagogues left in Thessaloniki.
Yes, I believe there are. There is a Jewish museum there that's very interesting. And it's not too far from our hotel. I think it would be easy for people to walk over there and take a look at it. There was a question about Alexander the Great. He's important in this history of Thessaloniki. And among other things, we'll see a modern statue of him right there on the waterfront in the city. But we're going to Vergana, which is an important site for this period, and it is a place where we may find more remains from Philip, the father of Alexander, and other people. Philip had a palace near Thessaloniki. It's a few hours away. I'm not sure if we're going to it. And there have been great excavations there that have revealed major pebble mosaics, not the kind of Roman mosaics that you're familiar with from other ancient sites in the Mediterranean, but these are Greek mosaics made of river pebbles, which were collected, and they would put together a palette of colors, a range of colors, and use these to form figural and ornamental mosaics. They're very interesting to see. But I'm not sure if we're going there. I'm not so clear about the exactly what we're seeing in the region around Thessaloniki. Maybe you know, Lauren, but I don't.
I just noted that someone had a question about brochure with travel information. Sarah says housekeeping stuff. We do have a brochure that has the housekeeping stuff, and it also has sort of the details of the itinerary, so may touch on that point that you raised. But yeah, I don't know as much about the Jewish history in Thessaloniki. Sorry, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, this is going to be a useful trip, I think, in a way for people to learn something. We're going to be on buses for a bit of the time, and I'll be there, and you can ask me any question, and I will do my very best to answer them there. So we presumably will have guides on the bus as well, but I hope I'll be able to jump in and answer questions that you have. In Greece, I will not be able to lecture on archaeological sites, because in Greece, you have to have a special license to lecture on the site. Even though I'm a Yale professor, that doesn't qualify me from the point of view of the Greek government to lecture on site. I once had a colleague at the University of Chicago who got so irritated by this policy that he went and sat for the exam to become a Greek guide, passed it easily, and so he can do that, but I've never done that. Anyway, any lecturing I'll have to do, will have to be on the bus or in the hotel or something like that, or else you'll have to come and ask me questions, just one-on-one at the site. But I can't give general lectures.
And that's a good point, because we will have lecturers throughout the tour that are experts on the places that we're seeing. And so that gives you a wonderful opportunity to ask these kinds of specific questions. And I noted that I believe it was Florette who asked about the language, the Albanian language, and it was answered in the chat, but just to point out that it's an Indo-European language, and it's thought to trace back to the Illyrian culture that was in that region. I bring that up because that region sort of spans from that era into Macedonia as well. And Macedonia has a connection in the Illyrian language of being the great country, so the great region, and that has that, gives us the name of Alexander the Great. So a lot of the greats kind of come out of the connection to Macedonia and the linguistic history. So someone was asking about Alexander the Great, and there is a connection between Alexander the Great and Greece, of course, but also connections in Albanian history as well. So there's just so much in this area that is underexplored, particularly with the history of Albania. I'm thrilled that we're highlighting it on this tour. I'm thrilled that all of you have joined us to learn more. And I hope that this has been at least something to get your appetite going for further study on the history of Albania and Northern Greece, and for interest in the travel program. I want to thank Professor Nelson, who very graciously came in on this presentation to illuminate a lot of the things that you can see and do in the region, and encourage you to consider traveling with Professor Nelson on this tour or on a future tour, because he's one of our generous EL scholars, just really eager to share so much knowledge with us. So thank you, Professor Nelson.
And thank you, Lauren. I want everybody on the trip to call me Rob. I will not be professor on this trip. And anybody can email me. My Yale email address is very simple, robert.nelson@yale.edu. Anybody can email me with questions, and just address me as Rob. We're going to all be there working together on this trip to learn about these very interesting cultures. Thank you.
There's one more question before we sign off that I have to make sure that we cover, which is Jim wants to make sure I unveiled the identities of the two mysterious persons born in Albania.
Oh yes, well, I was just about to say, and Laura didn't want me to steal what she was going to say. So Hoxha, do I say his name right? The dictator who was presided over Albania without mercy for 45 years, was born in Gjirokaster, as was Ismail Kadare. the famous novelist. So that city has an infamous and a famous son. Thanks.
I put the name in the chat in case you want to look him up. And we included the links to the books for the other names. So we have both in here. And I encourage you to watch the presentation again, because there's lots of links and things like that that you can follow up on and learn more. We will send out a connection for the presentation where you can find it on our website, and we will also send out a link for the virtual tour so that you can study more. And thank you so much for joining this presentation for our Yale Alumni Academy Festival. We have another presentation tomorrow, so I hope you'll be able to tune back in, or if not, catch it on demand. And we'll see you next time. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.